In a small jungle clearing on the island of Espiritu Santo in Vanuatu, a group of Australian divers assemble their equipment in preparation for a series of dives to explore one of the world's largest accessible shipwrecks. Some of them are visiting the site for the first time, while others are old friends of the wreck, having been lured back time and time again. But for all of them, this visit has special significance, as it coincides with the 50th anniversary of the vessel's sinking. They will be guided through the wreck by Alan Power. Alan has escorted divers over the ship for many years and is considered the leading authority on the site.
I've got mine off today, look.
As they walk over the coral, only a few are prepared for the spectacle that awaits them just beyond the reef's edge. The wreck is famous to divers the world over and is known simply as the Coolidge, and it has lain here silently at the bottom of the Sagong Channel for 50 years. Immediately the divers are confronted by the ship's immense bulk, lying on its port side at the base of the slope. For a moment at the bow, they can relate to its size, but as they swim along the starboard side, past the 3-inch gun, and then down over the superstructure, the vessel dominates everything, towering above them. Even the crow's nest, so small in photographs they had studied earlier, takes on huge proportions when inspected at close quarters. Throughout the dive, tame fish recognise Alan and approach to beg for food, and they are rarely disappointed. The Oerlikon guns, once mounted each side of the bridge and now covered in marine growths, still swivel in their mountings. Continuing towards the stern, the divers pass along the boat deck, the now empty davits home to branching corals and sponges. At 40 metres, Alan angles down into the swimming pool, its once pristine surfaces encrusted by years of marine growth. At the lowest point of the pool, silt has collected preventing such growth, and when disturbed, reveals the original ceramic patterns. Strangely familiar shapes, disguised by the accumulation of years of debris, proved to be discarded Coca-Cola bottles lying next to an upturned field gun once carried as deck cargo. Ascending, the group enters the open promenade deck and head back towards the front of the ship. On later dives, they will venture inside the hull, but for now are content to remain outside and gather an overall perspective of the wreck. The captain's bathroom, disconcerting to view with the ship on its side, needs a little dusting after half a century of neglect. One of the ship's main anchors dwarfs Alan as the divers move over a reef of encrusted cargo that has spilled out of the vessel as she lay on her side. The sea has covered every man-made surface with its own veneer of living colour. Soft red and orange growths dominate, their true colours only evident in the camera's lights. And hard green corals provide shelter for a multitude of small fish. Under the bow, in the relative darkness of the ship's shadow, large stands of soft pink corals droop down to feed in the passing current. Before returning to the guideline, Alan retrieves a popular relic for the group to inspect, a Colt 45 pistol, and the results are quite predictable. Because of the depths involved, safety stops are made in shallow water to allow divers to decompress. This can often become a boring exercise, but Alan has provided a small coral garden, complete with tame fish, to maintain their interest. Here they are able to photograph a variety of species, or just relax and enjoy the passing parade. some of the fish still require some more training. And feeding the fish here takes on an entirely new dimension. "50 years earlier, on her 7th mission, the Coolidge entered Santo Harbour by the wrong entrance and struck 2 American mines. The damage was such that the captain elected to run the vessel at full speed up onto the reef, where she appeared to lodge quite securely. Initially it was thought that the ship wouldn't sink, and the 5,000 troops on board began a calm, orderly disembarkation. However, water was pouring into the hull faster than they realised, and an alarming list quickly developed. The order to leave all personal effects and to abandon ship was given, and troops used all means to scale the sides. In just over 1 hour, most of the troops had safely disembarked, but a few had remained trapped on the mess deck, unable to climb out due to the severity of the list. Army Captains Ewart and Colville dropped a rope into an opening where the men were trapped, and regardless of their own safety, entered the ship to assist them. They managed to help all the men out, but left it too late themselves, for the vessel was in the final stages of sinking and sliding off the coral, with the flag still flying and plunging to the bottom of the Sagon Channel. Captain Colville remembers being dragged underwater and assumes he was expelled from the wreck by a bubble of air escaping. Captain Ewart's body was never recovered. For his sacrifice and bravery, he was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross and the Rhode Island Cross. Shortly after the war, his family and friends erected a small memorial in the jungle close by to the Coolidge sinking. In the early 70s, some salvage work was carried out on the wreck to remove the fuel oil, and a large cut was made into the engine room to gain access to the valuable turbines and condensers. The hull is now covered in a mass of discarded pipes and equipment, forming a haven for fish and the basis for new generations of coral growth. Strangely, an old Remington typewriter stands by itself. The shark cage used by salvage divers still stands forlornly on the hull. It is through the large engine room cut that the divers will penetrate deep into the hull. Alan stops by one of the 13,000 horsepower electric motors that propelled the ship. Salvage work has left a mass of twisted pipes and fittings, and divers must exercise extreme care not to become entangled as they penetrate deeper inside the hull. Plunging to the very bottom of the cut, Alan pauses to check that the divers are ready to follow, and carefully squeezes through a small opening that leads into what was once the very nerve centre of the ship, the engine control room. Cautiously, the divers follow. It was from here, with its many gauges and controls, that power was distributed throughout the ship. The gauges now serve only as photographic subjects, and the controls are frozen in the positions they were left in 50 years earlier. Two brass telegraphs, a delight to any wreck diver's eyes, flank either side of the control room. Deeper inside the hull, things are a little confusing. Ladders and companionways seem to lead off in ridiculous directions until the divers recall that the ship is on its side and they are moving through an access shaft that will eventually exit where the second funnel used to be. Following the plan, the deeper section of the dive is now completed, and the divers rise to re-enter the ship at a shallower point. This area was once a row of individual cabins, but now all the dividing bulkheads have collapsed, allowing free access along their entire length. Many of the occupants' possessions lie buried in the silt for the observant divers to find. Finding their progress blocked by a metal bulkhead, the divers exit the hull through a convenient hole in the upper decking. Passing a ventilator shaft with porthole glasses spilling out, they make a mental note to inspect that compartment on their return journey. On one of the lower deck levels, Alan discovers some more personal effects, this time in the shape of a boot. The US Army insignia is clearly visible on the unworn sole. Brass lamps sprout from the walls like some strange mushrooms growing in the dark. With every turn they make, less light penetrates from outside, and the divers are now totally dependent upon torchlight, with the danger of a complete blackout due to disturbed silt a distinct possibility. Belongings and fittings litter the bottom everywhere. A cabin mirror. An electric hand torch. Twin basins where cabins once adjoined. Sinking to the very bottom of the compartment, Alan sifts through the accumulated artifacts. Squeezing through a small opening, the divers exit into the number 2 hole area to continue their exploration. When the ship sank, not only was it carrying the 5,000 troops, but all the necessary stores and equipment to support them in battle. Brand new trucks and other motorised transport direct from the factories never had a chance to be used in anger, and now lie in encrusted chaos deep in the holds where they were stored for the journey. A resident angelfish adds a touch of natural colour to the backdrop of rusting relics. Negotiating a passageway that leads to the forward hold, the divers find it to be crammed with American jeeps. Their wheels removed and originally stacked on wooden pallets that have since rotted away, they fill every available corner of the hold. Before heading back to the bow line, one final stop is made. The porthole and lamp room they passed earlier in the dive. A masthead lamp still rests against the hull, its lens shattered, but the copper casing mostly intact. The Coolidge boasted hundreds of portholes, and the spare glass replacements still lie buried in the accumulated silt. A coil of rope, stowed by some diligent seaman half a century ago, still hangs on its hook. On the return journey over the foredeck and winches, the camera is turned on its side to give a true perspective of the ship, and the diver's exhaust bubbles appear to defy the laws of nature. The queen angelfish that greeted them on arrival hovers as if to wish them goodbye as they ascend the guideline to the decompression stop. By now, some members of the group have made friends of their own. And yet others have found new ways to amuse themselves. The Coolidge was launched in 1931 by the wife of her namesake, US President Calvin Coolidge. At nearly 22,000 tons, she was one of the largest ships built in America at the time, along with her sister ship, the President Hoover. An advanced design, she boasted a twin-screw propulsion system of steam turbines and generators which powered two 13,000 horsepower, 4,000 volt synchronous propelling motors. 854 passengers were carried in air-conditioned comfort, and she was one of the first ships to incorporate a swimming pool. Contemporary brochures described her as the last word in seagoing elegance, but most of her luxurious fittings were removed on her conversion to a troop ship. However, the unique sculpture of a lady with a unicorn, situated over the fireplace in the smoking room, remains, and all visiting divers want to pay homage to the President's lady. Intent on paying their own respects to the lady, the divers approach the forward bulkhead. Moving along the hull above the promenade deck, the divers find ladders used by the troops when they abandon ship, still hanging above the opening to the smoking room. Dropping through the open hatch, the divers find themselves in a dark, empty void, unable to see the far side with their torches. They follow the floor, which rises vertically on their left, and head towards the stern. Suddenly, out of the darkness, the lady appears. She has stared down into this dark compartment for 50 years, her only company the divers who arrive to pay her fleeting visits. The photographer's torches cast eerie beams of light through the sculpture into the darkness beyond. One diver fulfills his private fantasy by giving the lady his personal compliment. Backing out of the room, ornate lights of glass and brass can still be seen on what was once the ceiling. Abruptly, the realities of war are brought sharply into focus as the divers pass the mass toilets installed to cope with 5,000 troops. There is no privacy in war. These facilities require the occupants to sit face to face and cheek to cheek. Suddenly, another unexpected encounter. The remains of a decorative fountain that adorned the ship's reception area, bathed in faint light from the skylight above. Turning into a side passage, the group finds a compartment crammed with strange egg-like shapes. They learn later that these are long-range fuel tanks for fighter aircraft. Close by, a cache of medical supplies is located, with bottles and containers of all shapes and sizes. Two ampules of what is probably morphine are uncovered by one of the divers. More mundane objects, such as mugs and cutlery, litter the mess deck. Here, Alan displays a whole range of crockery, including the ever-present Coca-Cola bottle. The allotted time for this dive exhausted, Alan heads for the exit. But the divers linger for a final moment before heading for the sunlit safety of the surface outside. On the eve of the anniversary of the Coolidge sinking, a barbecue is held at the Santo Hotel. Talk around the dining table is dominated by individuals' impressions of the wreck and the sights they have seen. Alan has probably heard the same conversations 1,000 times by various divers, but still somehow manages to maintain his enthusiasm. Some of this group will return to dive the Coolidge again, but all of them know that this occasion is different and will not be repeated in their lifetime. They have gathered together to mark the 50th anniversary of its sinking, and that time is now. A remembrance service to mark the occasion has been organised by the local church community, and the divers cram into some convenient transport to travel to the site, a small clearing at the roadside close by the Coolidge. Traffic laws in Vanuatu are somewhat relaxed, and the drive is memorable in itself, the divers clinging tightly to the sides of the utility as it sways along the palm-fringed roads. Attended by many of the Santo community and conducted by Bishop Michael Tavoa in the natural surroundings of the jungle, the ceremony proves moving by its very simplicity.
With that, we will sing our opening hymn, "O God, our help in ages past." O God, our help in ages past, our for years to come. Our shadow from the stars rolling the sun, our eternal light. Under the shadow of your throne, your saints are dwelling here. Sufficient is your arm alone, and thy defense is sure.
Alan reads the citation describing Captain Ewart's act of bravery.
United States was troop mess officer on duty in the enlisted men's mess at the time of the ship struck the mine. He personally checked the clearing of that area upon the alarm, and having safely reached his abandoned ship station, he learned of men trapped in the hold and went there. By lashing himself to the low end of the rope, he was able to hold it tight enough for men to climb up to safety, even though the ship was badly listing. Finally, as he attempted to climb up, almost vertically by that time, the ship careened and sank very quickly. Captain Ewart exhausted himself assisting many others, whose lives were undoubtedly spared at the expense of his own. He was born and grew up in Rhode Island. He has brothers Leonard and John, sisters Rita and Ruth, who were both written, or all of them were written to me, and he was given the Distinguished Service Cross and the Rhode Island Cross.
To give thanks to God for that fellow commitment and love for what they've shown, especially for people who live in these islands. And today, particularly, we stand here at the 50th anniversary to remember the sacrifices and of Elwood Ewart, long time plan when we leading troop from Australia to Vanuatu. And for that, in committing him, long hand long God, as in the rest.
After Bishop Tavoa's closing address, the divers gather for photographs around the memorial stone placed here by Captain Ewart's family.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah. Hold on. I need one for the top.
Intent on making a gesture of their own that will add further significance to the occasion, the divers plan their last excursion to the wreck.
How many dogs? Got 12 divers, 11 minus the cameraman. So the intention is to follow down the lead line initially. Alan's going to take the lead. Follow down the lead line initially, swim across to the bridge, and we'll just gather in a semicircle around the bridge while the flag raising is actually done.
Right.
If you can put your lights on it, light it up from behind, it should look quite good. Is any,
I don't want to
just take your numbers. Who are we missing?
wants to be next.
Or symbol anywhere, will that do?
This is a very significant
easier if you saw
solemn
it. 1,
moment.
2,
Oh,
3,
I'll have a minute, son.
Yes.
And what about...
Let's see what your Yankee salute looks like.
Yankee salute.
Come on.
Oh, salute Ivan!
Let's see what your Yankee salute looks like. It is thought fitting that Alan, who has done so much to protect and to promote the Coolidge, should be given the honour of raising the flag, and the group follow behind as he approaches the bridge to secure the line. Exactly 50 years to the day since the vessel met its inglorious end and sank with its ensign still flying, Alan fills the buoy with air and the stars and stripes proudly rise above the vessel once more. The divers linger for a final farewell. With the knowledge that they have played a small part in the ship's history, many are already sure that they will return to dive the Coolidge once again.